Have you ever looked at someone stuck in a toxic relationship and thought, why don't they just leave? Maybe it's a friend who keeps going back to the same partner. Maybe it's an employee who stays loyal to a terrible boss. Maybe it's someone who keeps forgiving betrayal after betrayal. From the outside, it seems obvious. If someone treats you badly, you leave, right? But what if that's not how human psychology actually works? What if some of the strongest attachments aren't created by happiness but by uncertainty? And what if the very thing keeping someone trapped isn't love at all? Most people believe loyalty is earned through good treatment. The logic seems straightforward: treat people well and they will stay, treat them badly and they will leave. It's simple and sometimes it's true. But if this explanation were complete, toxic relationships wouldn't exist. Abusive bosses wouldn't keep loyal employees. Manipulative friends wouldn't keep friends. And unhealthy relationships would end the moment the mistreatment started. Yet they often don't. In fact, something much stranger happens. Sometimes the worse the relationship becomes, the harder it is to leave. At first glance, that makes no sense until you understand one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms ever discovered. Imagine a slot machine. You pull the lever, nothing happens. You pull again, still nothing. Then suddenly, jackpot. A reward appears. Now, here's the surprising part. Psychologists discovered that rewards become more powerful when they are unpredictable, not guaranteed, not consistent, unpredictable. Because uncertainty creates anticipation, and anticipation keeps people engaged. This principle is called intermittent reinforcement. It's one of the strongest learning mechanisms in behavioral psychology, and it appears almost everywhere: gambling, video games, social media, and sometimes relationships. Imagine someone who is loving one day, distant the next, and affectionate again after that. The pattern becomes affection, rejection, affection, silence, affection. Your brain begins focusing on the next reward, the next good moment, the next apology, the next sign that things are improving. The relationship stops being about what is happening now. It becomes about what might happen next. And that's where the trap begins. Think about a friend who's dating someone toxic. Their partner ignores them for days, then suddenly becomes incredibly caring. For a brief moment, everything feels perfect. The brain doesn't remember the consistency of the pain, it becomes obsessed with the possibility of the reward. Outsiders see the bad treatment. The person inside the relationship sees the next chance for things to be good again. That's why toxic relationships can sometimes feel strangely addictive. Not because they're enjoyable, but because they're unpredictable. But intermittent rewards are only the first layer. The second layer is even deeper. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. Imagine you have spent 5 years building a relationship. You have invested time, energy, memories, and emotions. Now imagine realizing it isn't healthy. Living isn't just about walking away from a person, it's about confronting a painful question. Was all that time wasted? Humans hate that feeling. We want our investments to mean something. So instead of asking, is this good for me now? We ask, how can I make all those years worth it? And that question can keep people trapped for far longer than they realize. This doesn't only happen in relationships, it happens at work too. Imagine an employee working under a boss who constantly criticizes them. Nothing they do seems good enough. They are stressed, they are unhappy, they are exhausted. But once every few weeks, the boss gives them a praise. Just enough praise to create hope. Just enough validation to make them think maybe things are finally changing. And so they stay. Not because the environment is healthy, but because they are chasing the possibility that it might become healthy. Now, here's the part many people get wrong. They assume this only happens to weak people. It doesn't. Intelligence doesn't make you immune. Confidence doesn't make you immune. Experience doesn't make you immune. Because these mechanisms don't attack intelligence, they attack emotions. Even highly intelligent people need belonging. They need validation. They fear loneliness. They want hope. And when those emotional needs become connected to a person, logic often takes a back seat. This is why smart people can ignore obvious red flags, not because they don't see them, but because seeing them creates a painful conflict, a conflict between reality and what they desperately want to be true. This brings us to another hidden force: identity. Over time, relationships become part of who we are. Someone stops being just a partner, or a friend, or a mentor. They become part of our story, part of our identity. And leaving them can feel like losing a piece of ourselves. Sometimes the real fear isn't losing the person, it's losing the version of ourselves that existed with them. That's why people often defend relationships even when they know something is wrong. They're not only protecting the relationship, they're protecting the identity. Then there's loneliness, one of the most underestimated forces in human behavior. Many people assume that bad treatment is the biggest threat. Often it isn't. For some people, being alone feels even worse. The future is uncertain. Starting over is scary. Meeting new people is difficult. And the brain often prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar uncertainty. A toxic relationship is painful, but it's predictable. An unknown future is frightening, and sometimes fear wins. This creates a dangerous cycle. Mistreatment creates pain, pain creates a desire for relief. Relief arrives through occasional affection. Affection creates hope. Hope keeps the person invested, then the cycle starts again. Pain, relief, hope, pain, relief, hope. And before they realize it, they are no longer attached to the reality of the relationship. They are attached to the possibility of what it could become. The consequences can be enormous: years lost, opportunities missed, self esteem damaged, personal growth delayed. Not because people are irrational, but because they are human. Because the same psychological mechanisms that help us build relationships can sometimes trap us inside unhealthy ones. So, how can you recognize when loyalty becomes dangerous? Ask yourself a few questions. Are you attached to who someone is or who you hope they will become? Are you staying because things are improving or because you are waiting for improvement? If you met this person today, knowing everything you know now, would you choose them again? And perhaps the most important question: are you investing in the future or defending the past? These questions won't solve every situation, but they can reveal patterns that are easy to miss from the inside. So let's return to the original question. Why do people stay loyal to someone who treats them badly? The common belief is that they stay because they love the person. Sometimes that's true, but often the answer is much more complicated. They're staying because of hope, because of identity, because of fear, because of sunk costs, because unpredictable rewards have convinced their brain that the next good moment is just around the corner. And that's the perspective shift. The strongest attachments are not always the healthiest ones. Sometimes loyalty isn't a sign that something is invaluable. Sometimes it's a sign that something has become psychologically difficult to leave. And understanding that distinction may completely change how you see not only other people's decisions, but your own.